Good morning and welcome to Dharma Review. This is the podcast where we talk about what's important to you, the meditator, the spiritual practitioner, and seeker. And it's been a while since we've been broadcasting, and we're going to talk about that this morning. It's now 5:33 on the Northwest Coast. Okay, for one thing, it has been a while, and I've been away for far too long. I'm back now, and I'm going to try and be consistent. It's been a difficult year. Finding a new home, a workspace, inviting my twin brother to move in with us, getting so busy just to keep a roof over all of our heads. Believe me, I know what so many of you, of us, are going through right now, and I want to address that today in some small way. This may seem a little self-indulgent, but hey, I've been paying for this podcast and this website even though I have not been broadcasting or using it lately. Well, for 8 or 9 months, to be frank. Foolish, perhaps, but not if you are interested in documenting everything that goes on or doesn't go on between 2 points in actual time. Get prepared for me, though, to be broadcasting a lot now, and I fully intend to get my money's worth. So here we go. I want to speak to a recently published interactive article that came out just this past December by Michael Hobbs of Highline and Huffington Post. It's really quite engaging and interesting, and quite a large collaboration of very talented folks. I'll post the link for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. Trust me, it's worth a look-see. I actually did my first draft for this episode the very next day after encountering it, but I am happy to see it is still being referenced and causing discussion. So I'm going to go forward with my plan to do a series of episodes inspired by this. I'm going to challenge Hobbs and his interviewees, however. But first off, the article is an entertaining, interactive piece of web-centric journalism. For that, I applaud him and the collaborative team that produced it. Kudos for that, guys and gals, and I think I know what you are trying to accomplish, if I read you correctly. But first, let me clarify something. All these labels that are used in the article, baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, may help define a general segment of our population for social science, but to use them in a divisive way, to lay blame for conditions that are oppressing us all, is not ultimately helpful. Yes, I get it that you, the younger generation, are trying to wake up and challenge your peers to not just accept this predicament we all find ourselves in. And so, well, you should. It has always fallen to the youth of a generation to push, nay, to fight for change. Change does not come easy, not to an individual, to an institution, or to a nation, and usually it does not come overnight. This whole trend, as you also point out, Mr. Hobbs, did not happen overnight. It really happened very gradually. Events, however, do happen overnight, like this past presidential election. But believe me, it really was years in the making. First off, every generation struggles. Every generation struggles. Yes, it's true, jobs seemed plentiful in the mid-'60s. Well, let's look at it. In the 50s, we were just coming out of World War II, and the government saw fit to make housing affordable via the GI Bill to every surviving soldier. Every surviving soldier. Hope and possibility were the catchphrase of the day. Work hard and you can get ahead. Every kid could find a job, bagging groceries, throwing a paper route, flipping burgers, being a car hop, or working for a veterinarian. Even pumping gas. Oh yeah, full-service gas stations were the norm. An attendant would pump your gas, check your oil, fill your tires, wash your windshield, and some would even clean your side mirrors. Imagine that, can you? People were not different. The country was different. Or was it? Was it really? On one level, well, it was. And on another, it wasn't. And it may take us a few episodes to get to all of this. But for the sake of this segment, let's just say it was different. For one thing, the population has increased. On July 1st, 1965, the population of the U.S. was 194 million plus. And on July 1st, 2017, we stood at 325 million plus. That's a big difference, folks. This comes from a website called Statista.com. And you can look it up yourselves, or you can go and look up statistics in other places. But according, as of 2016, to that report, roughly 180 million in the U.S. were under the age of 45, while only 120 million are 50 and over. So clearly, more of us are younger rather than older. Notice I said us, not you. I don't separate us versus them when talking about Americans. We are all in this together. Now, clearly, approximately 60 to 65 million are not of voting age because they are listed as being only 5 to 15 years of age. I am estimating from charts listed there on Statista.com. Stay with me for a moment. This is important in understanding our current predicament. That leaves 115 to 120 million of younger folk of voting age and approximately 120 million older folk who can vote. That indicates we should be pretty well matched in the voting polls. Oh, but wait. Let's look even closer at the population stats. Approximately 20 million of those are 70 and above. Now, how many over 70 people do you personally know who could be bothered to vote? Those who are in declining health usually think they aren't going to be around much longer, so why bother? I'm speaking from some experience here with my own folks and older friends. Okay, so let's recalculate a moment. So now we deduct that group we are looking at, 120 million younger potentially involved Americans, against 100 million older potentially involved Americans. I use the word potentially for a very good reason. That, too, we will cover in a further episode, okay? I won't bore you with too many more statistics except to say that exit polls indicated that 65 and older voters made up only 15% of the total voting population in 2016. Well, but in somewhat support of the millennial cause, 40% were 45 to 64. So that does make for a grand total of approximately 55% of voters that could be considered the older generation. The bigger picture, however, when we pull back, shows that voting turnout decreased to levels around 50% of the population, which actually was voting after 1988. For example, In 1960, 62% of the voting population voted. This trend has multiple factors. Now, that's what I am more interested in, and I am going to suggest that's really what we all need to take a hard look at. Why aren't more Americans voting and participating in democratic elections, supposedly the earmark of thriving democracies? By comparison, we don't look so good, folks. In Belgium, voter turnout was 87.2%. In Sweden, it was 82.6% of the population. And in Denmark, it was 80.3%. Australia, 79%. Need I go on? In fact, we are way down at the bottom of the list of countries, and yet we have about the same number of registered voters to population, around 86%. Around 86% of the population are registered voters. Are you getting the picture? We have either been too busy or too apathetic to vote. Or is it possibly both? I'm going to vote for both. But I think there is another cause. The harder it gets to make a living, to make ends meet, the harder it is to vote. Also, if you voted time and time again, and not much changed in your eyes, in spite of glorious promises by tell them what they want to hear politicians, people figure, well, why bother? Why bother? I can't tell you the number of times I have heard that from the mouths of coworkers, or even worse, like, I don't get involved in politics, or, it's all a bunch of bullshit anyway. It's all a bunch of BS. And we wonder why we are in the shape that we're in now in this country. First, let me say to all you millennials out there who might be listening, you are right to be upset. It sucks, doesn't it? But let me also say us older folks are in the same boat with you. Why didn't we prevent this slide into narcissism and bigotry? Have you thought that it might just be because we were too busy losing our jobs, our pensions, and our health care? Because we were too busy being foreclosed on and losing our vehicles, and too busy being discriminated against for our age and being told we were overqualified for what jobs remained? You don't have to tell us about it. We know firsthand, believe you me. But I want to tell you something you really don't want to hear. To some degree, we have been where you are. It wasn't lack of work, but rather lack of the ability to choose military service that concerned us. And having the ability to choose what fights we were going to fight, or that were worthy to be fought. We, the older generation, already protested needless war and corrupt government. We fought for civil rights for oppressed members of our cities, and we already helped impeach a dangerous president and helped end a horrible war. And now, I'm afraid, my young friends, it's your turn. Quit whining and get off your asses and do something. You need a job? You have one. Save our country. It's your turn. You're young, you're full of energy, you have healthy bodies with lots of stamina. You want guidance? You have it. And you have it in Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. You have it in Chuck Schumer and in Joe Biden. You have it in John McCain, and you had it in Barack Obama. You have it also in your poets, your writers, and your musicians most of all. But you also have it in many of your psych and history professors. Ask them what critical thinking is all about. However, if they can't explain slippery slope logic, quietly walk the other way. And if your history teachers can't tell why the history of the Weimar Republic is relevant to us today, don't walk. Run. To create change, it takes courage to stand up against what you see as injustice, corruption, and bigotry. And it takes real courage to say, no, we aren't going to let you get away with it anymore. Demand the end to gerrymandering, redistricting power plays. Say no to hate speech and divisive rhetoric. Say no to electoral colleges. But you better make darn sure you vote. Say no to smear campaigns and untruth. Demand verifiable facts, not BS. Only you can save this country now. And one more thing. Quit wasting your brains playing virtual reality games and watching network shows nonstop. Get up and organize. Make demands. It is, after all, your country. Now act like it. Why are we in this mess? It's simple. This is where greed and avarice has brought us. Right now, we have a government that thinks we are fools. We need to show them we are not. Living in a free society is not a birthright. It is hard work. Oh, you think we are not in a war here at home? You bet we are. It's a war of words, semantics, restructured definitions, propaganda, blatant falsehoods, engineered blind loyalty, scapegoating, and bullying. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Wrong. Words are everything in the information and communication age. They have the power to give life or death, even with one keystroke. In this very conversation, they have the power to control minds and actions. To those of us who have studied thought reform, as it was practiced on our POWs during the last Korean War, and studied how those techniques found their ways into numerous American cults of the 70s and 80s, we can see that what is happening right now in our country was predictable and even foreseeable. So, here's the big question, listeners. Will we stem the tide of mindlessness and crass propaganda, or will we fall over that precipice into the pit of totalitarianism? Nothing less is at stake. You want a future, my young friends? You better be willing to take the blinders off and cast away the yoke of indifference. It's time to stop laughing it all off as ridiculous. It's not a laughing matter anymore. No one person is going to do it for us. We all must do it together. If we don't, well, I'm afraid then we are all lost.
Oh.